This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Thousands turn up for state funeral of former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, including foreign dignitaries. How one local airline owner is helping to repatriate Nigerians fleeing xenophobic attacks in South Africa. And election campaigns wind up ahead of presidential polls in Tunisia. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up this hour, how an initiative in Western Kenya is helping farmers to produce healthier produce, and African female writers dominate literary awards winners in South Africa. We begin in Zimbabwe, where the former President Robert Mugabe will be buried in around 30 days and not Sunday, as it had earlier been communicated. That's according to the family spokesperson. The burial site, however, remains to be the National Heroes Acre Monument. Meanwhile, his state funeral is currently underway. Several African leaders and current as well as past presidents are attending. Thousands of people have gathered at Rufaro Stadium in the capital, Harare, to pay their tributes to the fallen leader. The late Mugabe died in a Singapore hospital a week ago at the age of 95. He ruled Zimbabwe for 37 years until when he was ousted by the army in November 2017.
The government and the chiefs, the traditional leaders, went to the Heroes Acre. They showed each other where the President Mugabe is going to be buried, and that place would take about 30 days to complete. So what that means is the burial would take that long, the actual burial.
The Heroes Acre is a very important shrine, and it symbolizes the greatest honor one can be bestowed with posthumously. And it can only be a place where men and women who have contributed to the liberation of this country, and men and women who have contributed to the building up of this country.
Let's take a look at the life of Robert Mugabe and the triumph and trials of one of Africa's longest-serving leaders.
A brilliant mind, a ruthless politician, and a way with words that made the whole world listen.
Neither Bush nor Blair can bring about regime change here. Never. We'll never accept it.
However much the years aged Robert Mugabe, the sheer power of his character has never faded. And whatever his critics may say, for Zimbabwe's independence, Mugabe has earned his right to be counted among the icons of Africa's liberation era.
This is a great moment. It's a moment of our victory, the culmination of our national struggle.
Born in 1924, Robert Gabriel Mugabe looked destined for life in the classroom. But his education brought a taste for the principles of basic human rights and revolutionary fervor. And he became a key figure in the fight against white rule. Once that fight was won, Mugabe offered peace with some honor to the white minority and pursued policies that won him global acclaim, even a knighthood. Land reform was always going to be difficult, and when Mugabe pursued a far more aggressive approach to the redistribution of land, former supporters outside Zimbabwe turned on him. But Mugabe remained defiant.
The issue of our sovereignty, the issue of our land, is not negotiable. Our resources, let those who come negotiate with us to participate in our resources. But our gold is ours. Our platinum belongs to us. Our diamonds are ours. They are not American, they are not British.
But the economy collapsed in those dark years, staging a recovery only after regional leaders forced Mugabe to form a government of national unity in 2008. Africa's former breadbasket even now remains a shadow of what it had been, forced in recent years to import to stave off a food crisis. Mugabe's popularity at home remained undiminished. For many, his message was just as compelling as it had been during the struggle.
There will never be a regime change here. There will always be the people of Zimbabwe in control.
But even after his dramatic ouster and death in self-imposed exile, the divisiveness of his legacy will continue to dog the memory of one of Africa's longest-serving leaders. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
Mugabe's family and the Zimbabwean government had been at odds over where and when the late leader would be buried. They have now agreed to entomb him at a monument for national heroes in Harare. The final ceremony is expected to take place in 30 days' time after a new mausoleum is built for Mugabe.
We are building a mausoleum for our founding father at the top of the hill. At the Heroes Acre. It won't be finished, so we'll only bury him after we've completed the construction of his mausoleum.
CGTN's Farai Mwakutuye is following Mugabe's state funeral in Harare. He joins us on the line from there. Farai, let's first begin with the planned events for Saturday. What's the latest from the state funeral of Robert Mugabe?
Well, I can tell you that currently the funeral ceremony is underway. Speaking at the podium is a family representative who is speaking on behalf of the Mugabe family. His body was brought into the stadium a short while ago. There are several thousand people here in the stadium, and several heads of state who've already arrived and will be witnessing this ceremony. What we expect is that we will have speeches from the President of Zimbabwe as well as other heads of state. Certainly Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta will speak, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and some former heads of state will also speak at this event. There will be all the full military honor, military parade, 21 gun salute. And then from here, we do understand that his body will be taken to his rural home in Njimba for the very first time since his body came back into the country. So that is the lineup for today, a very, very big send-off that is planned, and proceedings will continue tomorrow in this village.
Okay, so Farai, we'd heard from the government earlier on that Mugabe would be laid to rest tomorrow, Sunday. Now we're hearing the government saying that will happen in 30 days' time. Talk to us more about this.
Well, I think the challenge, or certainly the reason for the change of the plan, obviously to build this mausoleum that needs to be erected. There were these consultations that had been going on between the family and the government over where he would be buried. The family has agreed and reached a consensus that he will be buried and interred in the National Hero Shrine, but only in this special built mausoleum. So that will happen after 30 days. And as such, the burial that had been planned for tomorrow will not go ahead or cannot go ahead, and will go ahead at a time as when that process is done. We're still waiting to see if it will be a private or a public event, because we do know that the family was quite keen on making it a very private, small, intimate affair. But we'll wait to see what form it takes when it does happen in about 30 days' time.
All right, Farai, thank you for that update. Farai Mwakutuye on the line from Harare. Let's now head to Nigeria, where one man is currently trending at the moment for his unusual philanthropic and patriotic gesture. Alan Onyema, who is the owner of the country's biggest commercial airline, Air Peace, volunteered to fly Nigerians willing to come back home from South Africa following the xenophobic violence there for free. His airline has already flown back the first batch of 187 returnees and is on standby to continue the flight. So, just why is he doing this? Here's Deji Badmas with more on that story.
A leading light, an example to be emulated.
The CEO of Air Peace, Mr. Onyema, believes will show the world that Nigerians are their brother's keepers.
That is just a tip of the kind of coverage Alan Onyema is getting in the Nigerian media space at the moment, following his decision to provide free flights for Nigerians fleeing xenophobic attacks in South Africa. He was the first person to meet and greet with the Nigerian returnees just as the plane conveying them landed in Lagos. And here is that emotional moment of the meeting on board his Air Peace aircraft.
We want men like this in Nigeria. We want men like this, the tribalized Nigerian.
Onyema launched Air Peace Airline in Nigeria in 2013, starting with just 7 aircraft. Despite the country's tough aviation environment, he's been able to build his fleet to over 25, making his commercial airline the largest in the country. Air Peace now covers several domestic, regional and international routes. So why did the airline chief executive decide to bring back the Nigerian returnees from South Africa for free?
We decided to do it free of charge for our country and for our people. We decided to do it because we want to show that it's not all about money, that one cannot go to his grave with his purse, neither can one go to his grave with his bank account. But you can go to your grave happily with the legacies you leave behind.
Over $700,000, that's how much this free flight is costing Mr. Onyema's airpiece. The figure could even go much higher, depending on the number of trips his Boeing 777 eventually makes.
My pilots are ready. If the Nigerian High Commission calls us this night to say, oh, we have another 200 to move, we shall dispatch another set of pilots to go and bring our people back.
Mr. Onyema is doing all of this without being asked by the Nigerian government. His patriotism has received praises across the country, and he's been the subject of discussion on many local TV and radio shows.
It takes a good Nigerian, the sort of Nigerian that I will be proud of any day, to take this kind of decision.
When the National Honors List is being compiled, I think the owner of Airpeace should be recognized, for the patriotism that he has demonstrated at a key hour of need.
We've been able to show the world that nobody can break the resolve of Nigerians. Nobody can break the resolve of Nigerians to live together as one nation.
He's indeed a clear demonstration of true and undying patriotism. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, nearly 200 Nigerians have voluntarily returned home from South Africa so far following the xenophobic violence. One of the returnees has been narrating his experience to our correspondent Deji Badmos. Take a listen.
I stay in Van Beek Street. You see, the one of my brother name as Tedus Duru Ibogo. They covered him with plastic inside the room and tie him up. Then the boy couldn't be able to wake up and couldn't be able to shout. Then they carry him and threw him inside their vehicle.
Who did it?
Then two men, young men, you see.
South Africans?
Suspect. Yeah, they are South Africa. They are South Africa. Carry him away on non-destination. Up till now, we could not find him. We reported to the police, wherever. They couldn't find him, you see. So, in fact, not only that, even 5 days ago, they come where we are staying, in the same Van Beek, and burn our shop where we are staying. Scatter everything, steal everything. There are more than 40-something.
What were you doing in South Africa?
I'm under mechanic. You see, I'm under mechanic. Then my junior brother is selling provisions.
And for how long were you in South Africa?
Yeah, I'm there 18 years in South Africa. Then I've not been home. Then see, this thing happened, then we use that opportunity and come back home.
What about your family? You had a family in South Africa?
No, I don't have a family because I have a family in Nigeria. I always communicating with them, you see. So
you were in South Africa for 18 years. Are you surprised that this thing could be happening?
My brother, they have been doing this thing severally, but this time around, it's too much. You see, it's too much. When they do today, 3 days, they do. 2 days, they do. My brother, this injustice.
And the police did nothing?
Police did practically nothing. If you call them on phone, what is happening? They will not come. Even if our brother laying down now as an injury, what they did, you call police, you will not come. You see? So, we are tired of them. Even not only this one I'm talking. If you ask other people, you hear what is happening to their place. You see, this one is what I see and what I witness. You see, so I'm telling you, Nigerians there is our style, and not only Nigeria, both Ghanaians, both other foreign countries. You see.
So, now that you're back, do you ever plan to go back to South Africa?
God forbid, to go back to Nigeria, to South Africa again. Not me. Nobody out here that will go to South Africa, I allow him. No.
Meanwhile, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says the country is committed to rooting out xenophobia and xenophobic attacks. He was speaking in Pretoria while visiting the home of the taxi driver whose death triggered violent attacks against foreign nationals. CGTN's Ulisan Jamila has more on this story.
The violence that engulfed South Africa in the past few weeks was sparked by the killing of a taxi driver in Pretoria. Reports state that an alleged drug dealer, a foreign national, shot and killed the taxi driver. The taxi driver had apparently been trying to stop the peddling of drugs. After the killing, South African taxi drivers and locals instantly retaliated, taking the matter into their own hands. On Friday, in his capacity as the leader of the governing African National Congress, President Cyril Ramaphosa visited the family of the slain taxi driver, Jabu Baloyi.
Jabu Baloyi has become a major symbol on the issue of drugs because he took a stand. And in the course of taking a stance and a stand against drugs, he sacrificed his life because he is one of those members of our community who felt very strongly against the peddling of drugs and the drug abuse that's happening in our communities, and he sought to stop that.
Ramaphosa used the opportunity of this visit to also commit to ensuring that xenophobic attacks are swiftly dealt with.
We are totally committed against attacks and to foreign nationals, including xenophobic tendencies or feelings towards others. We need, as South Africans, yes, to deal with the challenges that we face, whether it be job issues or whatever, and drugs. But as we do all that, we should also make sure that we do not take out our anger against people from other nations, and indeed against anyone amongst us as well.
A number of foreign nationals have opted to leave South Africa with immediate effect after the attacks, citing a fear for their lives. 12 people died during the attacks, 10 of them South Africans. President Ramaphosa has opted to delegate the International Relations and Cooperations Minister Naledi Pandor to attend the session at the United Nations General Assembly later this month to ensure that he attends to immediate and critical issues in the country, such as this one. Yolisan Jamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. Here's what's coming up. Election campaigns wind up ahead of presidential polls in Tunisia. And why Kenya is optimistic of securing a non-permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council.
Solemn, introvert. Even if he was just standing, you would see him, he would just stand. You will see he's somewhere else.
Zimbabwe became the diplomatic hub of the region, all because of meaningful sentiments that the president exhibited then.
When you're in prison, you say, okay, when we get out these bastards, we're going to deal with them.
We've had a total breakdown of the rule of law.
Both of us needed to play our responsibility in order to save the nation.
We will still be there as a family together.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tunisians head to the polls in less than 24 hours to choose a successor of the late President Beji Essebsi. President Essebsi died in July, 3 months before the end of his tenure. 26 candidates, among them 2 women, are now vying for the top office in the country after roughly 2 weeks of campaigning. A second vote could take place in November if no candidate secures a majority. Charged voters lined the streets on the last day of campaigns to highlight their preferred candidates in efforts to gain support. With a somewhat unpredictable election ahead, voters are hoping the next president can revive sectors such as the economy.
We, the youth, are the present and future of Tunisia. On September 15th, we are going to change the reality and change the future of Tunisia with the choice we make.
The president must have more power and authority because he is the president. Do you know what this means? The president is the head of the Tunisian family.
The next president must rescue the country from the crisis it is in, especially the economic crisis and the education crisis, which is getting worse compared to previous years. The president we elect must save our country and elevate it to its greatest potential.
Now, out of the 26 candidates running for office, only 2 are women. Women's rights activists have hailed the move, but say there's need for increasing women's representation in power to have a balanced society.
The National Committee for the Promotion of Gender Equality in the Management of Local Affairs in Tunisia has called on candidates in the 2019 presidential election to commit to uphold the principle of gender equality and combat gender discrimination during and after the presidential campaign.
Women are candidates, presidents of polling stations. Over 49% of registered voters are women. Women are the pillar of the presidential election.
Activists consider that the participation of women in political, civil, economic, social and cultural life and in the fight against all forms of discrimination against them is one of the prerogatives of the President of the Republic.
There are not enough women in the decision-making positions, although women take part in political and democratic transition. Gender balance must be guaranteed by the new president.
Many voters believe that the result of the Sunday poll could have a direct impact on the social and economic conditions of Tunisian women.
It is important to have a woman candidate or a president, but the most important thing is that the next president gives priority to women's affairs and quest for gender equality. Competence is the first criteria.
Over 100 civil society organizations have expressed their commitment to ensure the effective participation of women in political life, particularly in the management of local affairs, in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, the Local Authorities Code and the international conventions ratified by Tunisia.
During the 2014 presidential elections, over 1 million women voted for late President Beji Essebsi. Their votes were decisive in the run-up to the Carthage Palace. This time, 1.5 million people were cast their ballots for the first time, including over 600,000 women. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Reactions continue to trail the decision of the Presidential Elections Petitions Tribunal in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The tribunal dismissed the petition filed by the main opposition candidate, Atiku Abubakar. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam examines the thoughts of a cross-section of Nigerians on the court's decision.
The media have been awash with reports of the election tribunal's decision, which upheld the election of President Muhammadu Buhari. Opposition party candidate Atiku Abubakar petitioned for various reasons. One of them, that the president didn't have a secondary school leaving certificate as required by law and should therefore be disqualified. But the court thought otherwise, affirming that President Buhari was in fact qualified to contest.
Now the president claimed he has a certificate. He was not able to tender anyone. It has created a lot of problem in our judicial system, which means a thug can even come and claim that he went to university. In fact, he's a PhD holder. I will not be obliged to produce a certificate.
to me, I'm not satisfied. In the sense that, because why do we go to school? Why do we do hustle to have a certificate? Is to become somebody in life, and to tender it when it's needed.
Atiku and his party, the PDP, also claimed that the results were marred by irregularities and fraud. He claimed that the central server of the electoral umpire showed he garnered the highest votes, but that too was flung out for lack of proof.
The tribunal works on evidence. The bulwark of justice is evidence, okay? So when you go to a court, you are not going to go to court with hearsay. And election, like I said, is a very technical thing. My sense is that it was a well-delivered judgment. My sense is that it captured some of the lessons that we should have learned as citizens of this country and our understanding of the electoral process.
The issues are far deeper than the election outcome in itself. Nigeria went into the elections with 18 million additional voters, about 91 new political parties, and against the backdrop of amendments to the electoral law. There was also the perennial issue of logistics. Many here now say there's need to put extra efforts into making the electoral process more seamless and transparent in order to reduce issues of disputes. Kelechi Emekalam, CGT in Abuja, Nigeria.
Kenya is set to officially launch its campaign for one of the non-permanent seats at the United Nations Security Council after the African Union endorsed it. Kenya won the endorsement after garnering 37 votes against Djibouti, which also expressed interest in the seat.
Kenya's bid for the non-permanent United Nations Security Council seat took off early in 2019 at the African Union in Addis Ababa, where it beat Djibouti in a vote. Djibouti congratulated Kenya, but later appeared to withdraw its support, stating that it would remain in the running for the seat. Kenya maintains that it is Africa's sole representative in the race.
So far, we have the African endorsement, but we continue to receive confirmed assurances of support from across the world, from the Middle East, from Asia, from Europe, from the Americas, from the Caribbean, and we believe that we are going to start our campaign on a very strong footing.
Ideally, AU's endorsement would almost certainly guarantee Kenya Africa's 55 votes. But even with this endorsement, Kenya has to get support from across the world to secure the seat when the election is held in New York in 2021, enabling it to join the 15-member Security Council. Kenya will need to secure votes from at least 2/3 of the United Nations member states in order to secure a seat on the United Nations Security Council, which comprises countries such as China, France, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, and the United States. There are 10 fixed-term membership slots shared among African and Asian countries. The General Assembly elects non-permanent members for 2 years. Kenya has previously served 2 terms as a UN Security Council non-permanent member in 1973, 1974 and 1997-1998, and is keen to secure another term in order to boost its position as a regional diplomatic hub.
Our candidature is themed Peace and Security for Sustainable Development, and we will focus on an agenda that enhances the relations between the Council and the African Union and the regional peace and security mechanisms, including the AU Peace and Security Council, the IGAD, ECOWAS, and all the other regional security mechanisms.
But Djibouti's determination to vie for the same position poses a challenge, owing to the little country's close ties with powerful allies. As the race heats up, Kenya is preparing to launch its campaign in Ethiopia before taking it around the world, efforts which it hopes will bear fruit come June 2021. Bulkisa Nyabwa, CGTN.
Flash floods in Algerian cities have submerged streets and subway stations in water, leaving drivers trapped and pedestrians to battle with muddy mini rivers. Heavy rains have also affected the capital's new airport. However, no deaths have been reported so far. Residents have accused city authorities of failing to maintain the infrastructure. Some videos on social media show vehicles being swept away, causing panic. In Nigeria, a familiar threat of seasonal floods is also raising concerns. Some parts of the country have already been hit, with the Emergency Management Agency warning residents to be on high alert. CGTN's Daniela Pearson reports.
This is Lokogoma, a small area in Nigeria's capital city, Abuja. Recently, it experienced flash floods causing heavy traffic as cars forced their way through the water. According to the United Nations Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs Office, floods have engulfed several areas in the northeast of the country, affecting over 3,000 people. The situation needs urgent attention.
The government need to do something, equip them well, let them come to here, establish their outpost as an office to make sure they have a proper drainage. For me, I think this drainage here is very small for the kind of flood that's passing through here.
Maybe you check towards the back past ages, maybe some 10 years ago, what is the strength of the flood? Then you begin to construct your culvert, not just to do it anyhow, but to do the culvert according to the volume of flood that comes here. That will solve the problem.
Last year, some 200 people died as a result of floods, and over 500,000 were displaced. The Abuja Emergency Management Agency has warned that heavy floods may occur again. A list of areas at risk has also been made available by the agency.
Definitely, we should expect more flooding because what we saw before was just an urban flooding. What we are expecting in the next 2 or 3 weeks to come is the river flooding. And so people should be wary of that. We are prepared fully even before the rainfall, because it's part of our work to make sure that we're prepared ahead of time.
Poor drainage systems in many areas are a major cause of flooding. Motorists and residents will need to be on high alert to avoid getting swept away by the impending calamity. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Let's take you back to Zimbabwe, where foreign dignitaries have joined the citizens at the National Sports Stadium in a ceremony to mourn the passing of the country's longtime leader, Robert Mugabe. Let's take you live there. Let's have a listen in.
Distinguished heads of delegation, and you, the great people of Zimbabwe, I join you today, Your Excellency, and the people of the Republic of Zimbabwe to bid farewell and to celebrate the life of an African liberation icon, the founding father of the Republic of Zimbabwe, and an elder statesman of our African continent, the late Comrade Robert Gabriel Mugabe, who passed on the 6th of September this year. On behalf of the government and the people of the Republic of Kenya, and on my own behalf, I extend my deepest and most heartfelt condolences to you, Your Excellency, and through you to Mrs. Grace Mugabe, the entire Mugabe family, and to the great people of the Republic of Zimbabwe, following the demise of the father of the nation. Comrade Mugabe will be remembered as a Pan-Africanist and a great icon of African liberation who selflessly dedicated his life to the emancipation of Zimbabwe and Africa. He was a visionary leader and a relentless champion of African dignity. The late President Mugabe has left an indelible mark in the history of Zimbabwe and the African continent at large through his political astuteness and zeal for the economic and political liberation of Africa. The onus is now on us to keep the hope alive and deliver on the dream of a truly free and prosperous Africa. That is the most befitting tribute we can pay to the departed African statesman. The late Comrade Mugabe was an embodiment of the Pan-African spirit, offering immeasurable assistance.
All right, so Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta paying his tribute to the late Zimbabwean leader Robert Mugabe. He's of course joined by other African leaders, heads of states and government and foreign dignitaries, including Chinese President Xi Jinping's special envoy Gu Shengju in Harare. That public memorial service, being called a state funeral, is taking place at the Rufaro Stadium where Robert Mugabe was sworn in as the state leader almost 40 years ago. He did come to power after leading the country to independence from the UK, and he was in power for 37 years. Right, now according to the World Health Organization, every 40 seconds a person commits suicide, which translates to about 800,000 deaths annually worldwide. Although 79% of the world's suicide cases occurred in low and middle income countries, high-income countries had the highest rate at 11.5 deaths per 100,000. Here in Africa, Lesotho tops the list with highest rates of suicide at 21.2 deaths in every 100,000 population. In East Africa, Uganda has the highest rate with 9.9 deaths linked to suicide in every 100,000. When reviewed through a gender lens, male suicide cases tend to be significantly higher than female rates around the world. However, in Lesotho, the rate of female suicides is higher at 24.4, while reported male cases stand at 17.8 in every 100,000. Nigeria, Sierra Leone and Uganda show very close rates of suicide between men and women. In its 2017 report, the World Health Organization said only 60 of its member states had vital registration data good enough for the direct estimate of suicide rates. Most of Africa lacks the infrastructure necessary to deal with this mental health problem. Now let's get a deeper take on the issue of mental health on the African continent. I'm joined here in studio by Silas Kirinya. He's a consultant counseling psychologist and CEO of Amazon Counseling Center here in Kenya. Silas, thank you for joining us today. Okay, so these are alarming statistics we are getting. What are the factors contributing to these rising cases of depression and suicide?
Yeah, I think as you said, there is a lot of mental issues that are happening in Africa, and let me say in the world, because mental issues are not basically about Africa, is something that affect every other person in the entire world. Now, there are different factors that contribute to mental health issues, and particularly like there's life, the high standards of life that we are living nowadays, the disintegration of the social fabric. For example, African culture is known very well, to emphasize on family and all that. And so you realize there's a lot of movement into towns and urbanization. And so all these are actually contributing to mental health issues. And so people respond to that in different ways. So for example, we are talking about suicide literally being the, scaling at the moment. Because many people feel like they are so helpless and they don't know where to seek help, or they don't have the proper information, they don't have infrastructure to help them deal with the helplessness that they are experiencing. So that's why most people are thinking of suicide.
And here in Kenya, we're increasingly seeing more young people committing suicide. What does that say about the stresses of modern life?
Yes, there's a lot of stress, definitely, because the culture that we are living in now encourages a lot of competitiveness. And therefore you realize that people are competing in everything, and in particular the young people, they want to look good, they want to appear the best in whatever form. There is also relationship breakup that is happening among the young people, and somehow they do not know how to deal with that because the skills of resilience have not been really empowered enough. There is also substance use. Of course, we have what we call substance use psychosis, which is, you know, kind of mental illness that you get when you use substance. Like a lot of weed is being used in almost every celebration in our universities and schools. And therefore, because of that, you realize that people have gotten to a point that they do not know how to deal with that all helplessness, the addictions that they are going through, and therefore there is what we are seeing, people committing suicide. But also, I think it's good we consider even the pressure that young people are facing in schools, in the universities, at home. No, everybody expects you to be the best, but at the same time, you're grappling with so much in life and you don't know how to deal with that.
Okay.
And because of what I mentioned, the fabric of our society is not as strong as it was before, and so they do not know where to go to, they don't know who to talk to, and so ultimately we see young people committing suicide.
All right, so what I'm getting from you ultimately is people not knowing where and how to get help. In other parts of the world, they have elaborate support systems to help such people. But here in Africa, what can African countries and governments do to create accessible support systems or coping mechanisms?
One of the main things I think that the government should do in Africa is create a lot of awareness so that people get to know that mental illness is not a weakness as we perceive it in Africa, because African culture always has emphasized on people being very strong, fighting whatever it is that is happening in their lives. And so we have gotten to a point that there's a lot of pressure and we are not able to deal with that. So the government should create a lot of awareness for people to know that what mental health issues are. And then after doing that, we need to lay down structures that are able to provide psychological support. We need to have hospitals. We need to have in our medical cover resources and policies that are able to allow that, so that people can come in and get supported. Okay. The other thing also, we need to create even lines that are open so that at any point of the day or night, when someone is experiencing a lot of helplessness, is able to call and get assisted. That need to be put in place. Of course, we need also policies that are able to support and minimize victimization that people with mental health experience in Africa.
You took it right out of my mouth. I was going to ask you what kind of policies are needed in the continent actually to facilitate people to access this help.
Yeah, so other countries actually have a robust, policies that are able to take care of their population or their populace. But in Africa, you come to realize that mental health is not a priority. So we focus on what we would call medical problems, like you have cancer, you have all these other illnesses, so you know where to go to. But then when it comes to mental illnesses, at times we do not know what to do with that. So there must be policies that are really robust and well researched, that are able to provide platforms for the people to get help, and especially the young people.
All right, Silas, thank you very much for that. Silas Karinya in studio with us. You're watching Africa Live, coming up in Business News. How an initiative in Western Kenya is helping farmers to produce healthier crops.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Here in Kenya, a community project based in the western part of the country is helping to spur the growth of the agriculture sector. The initiative prepares compost manure from organic waste collected from a local town. Here's Beryl Oro with that story.
On a typical day, this organic waste from Kitale town in Kenya's Rift Valley region would be transported to a local refuse center where it would be burned or just left to rot away. However, it is now being delivered here for much better use, that is, production of manure. David Ngige started Dajopen, a local community project which has been pushing local farmers to use organic manure. Once delivered, the waste is sorted and later dumped into a pit where enzymes are added. It is a meticulous process.
After decomposting for 4 to 6 weeks, the compost is ready, and then we remove it, and then we add some calcium from eggshells, from crushed eggshells, and then from there we sieve it, and after sieving it, we package it in bags ready for sale.
Kitale is an agricultural town with maize being its main produce. However, farmers have been experiencing low yields due to erratic rains and the use of synthetic fertilizers. Experts say these artificial manure have degraded soil fertility, leading to low harvests. That is what Dajopen is seeking to reverse.
Organic farming will really solve a lot of problems concerning organic carbon, because organic material is the source of all the nutrients, and it is also able to regulate the soil pH. Once we have our organic carbon right, organic matter right in our farms, we will not worry so much about soil acidity.
David started this organization in 2009. The project currently has 34 members. Although sales were low initially, community awareness and sensitization has seen sales increase marginally.
The fertilizer is affordable because it costs half the price of synthetic fertilizer, so it's very pocket-friendly for farmers. On top of that, the yield we get from maize has improved. We used to get 5 bags with synthetic fertilizer, but this one gives us more than 9 bags of maize, so it has improved things.
Each bag costs slightly above $12, which is almost half the price of synthetic fertilizers.
In the last planting season, we were able to make 2,560 bags of this organic fertilizer, each weighing 50 kilograms. At each bag we sell at 1,250.
Local farmers in Kitale and proponents of the Dajopen initiative are hoping that the organic way of farming will lead to healthier produce and a more sustainable mode of agriculture. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Kenya is hosting the region's largest automotive exhibition. Autoparts East Africa seeks to highlight the latest technology trends in different categories, including auto parts, electronic systems, and auto accessories, amongst others. From the Kenyan capital, here's CGTN's Robert Nagila.
The automotive industry in Kenya has grown exponentially over the last decade. Motor vehicle sales in Kenya grew by 18% in 2018, with over 14,000 new cars sold and about 90,000 second-hand vehicles imported in the same period. It's with this in mind that Nairobi is playing host to Eastern Central Africa's largest automotive industry event. Several of the companies showcasing their hardware and accessories are from China.
All of our products are only for heavy-duty trucks. One is for brake lining and one is for rubber parts. And the third part is for high-strength wheel bolts.
The firm's representative says there's been a good reception to their products.
We have some customers, for example, Isuzu customers is very professional to us. They are very interested in our brake linings, and they also leave samples for us.
Some of the latest innovations in vehicle technology is on display here, from mechanical parts, sound accessories, and car care products.
We are distributor of 3M Automotive film, which people know very well as Tint. not only tint, but we also distribute car care products.
Some of the products on display are manufactured locally, an indication of just how much the motor vehicle industry has grown over time.
We do manufacture, for example, these filters. They're locally manufactured, everything. We've got them, it's been about 20 years we've been doing this.
The government of President Uhuru Kenyatta has pledged to promote the automotive industry. Already, Volkswagen and Peugeot have set up plants in the country where they produce some of their latest models. And with several motoring events, including the Concours d'Elegance, a classic motoring event, and the Total Motor Show on the annual calendar, organizers are hoping this event, dubbed Autoparts East Africa, will be a permanent fixture going forward. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
African female writers dominated the Sunday Times Literary Awards in South Africa. Terry Coogan and Siphiwe Ndlovu walked away with 2 of the country's top literary accolades and $7,000, which will help boost their careers. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Terry Coogan's compelling photo novel Everyone is Present earned her the prestigious Alan Paton Award. It documents her family's flight from Nazi persecution in Poland in 1939.
It tells the journey of a forced migrants, refugees, fleeing Nazism, racism, xenophobia, ultimately genocide on the one hand, which connects with the global refugee conversation that is so much a part of the conversation the world's having at this moment. There have been many other genocides, but look at what happened in South Africa this week. We seem to learn nothing.
Fellow Zimbabwean author Siphiwe Ndlovu's debut novel, The Theory of Flight, won the Barry Ronger Prize. It's a story of love, loss and grief, which took 10 years to write. She hopes her work will resonate with other African readers.
I think it's always important to be able to find yourself in fiction, or find yourself in a story, or find yourself even in a movie. So it's important, I think, as a Black woman, and just sort of like as someone from the continent, to have a representation of what Black womanhood or Black girlhood is from an African perspective.
The Sunday Times Literary Awards has helped develop local literature over the last 3 decades, with the hope that homegrown content could grow South Africa's reading culture, which finds itself in a crisis.
So it helps to support reading in general by attracting readers to outstanding works. And sometimes one award leads to another, and ultimately it contributes to the growth of literature in our country, and to have people telling their own stories.
The Literary Awards has been honoring South African writers for the past 30 years. These 2 women are now added to the library of esteemed authors in the country, setting them on a new chapter in their lives. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And coming up in sports, Kenya names 49 athletes to represent it at the IAAF World Championships in Doha, Qatar.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken,